Okay.
Hey, Bob. How's it going?
Hey, Kevin. Kevin and Frank, you are both in Seattle, or at least I think you are. And Kathy, welcome.
Hey, Kathy.
Hi, everybody.
How you doing?
Good. I got to go back to the view. Sorry. I minimized everybody. Waiting for the show to start.
All right. Well, we're going to get underway in about 60 seconds. And
All right.
okay. All right. I think I'll go ahead and start. So welcome to the first 2024 Florida Civic Advance webinar. We've been doing webinars since February of 22 and trying to highlight civic excellence in a lot of different project activities throughout the state of Florida and communities, as well as beyond Florida. So today is the belonging belonging at the civic heart, at the heart of civic health, and we're going to feature a look at an initiative in the greater Seattle area in terms of belonging. And I'm going to let Tim Dutton introduce the panels and speakers, and I will then briefly highlight the housekeeping rules. So hopefully keep your device on mute. We'll have a Q&A in the last 20 or so minutes of the program, and you can open up at that point, and we use the chat to share questions, comments, and or links to resources. Really welcome that. And as we go through, if you have questions that you put in chat, we'll try and highlight and note those for the speakers to potentially answer the questions. But again, we'll have an open Q&A at the end. So civic health is part of our mission at the Florida Civic Advance, and it reflects the opportunities for people to have a voice and to participate in their communities and to find solutions together. The kinds of indicators of civic health include, and these are related to research points, but higher employment rates, stronger schools, more responsive local governments, accessible civic gathering places and libraries and parks and recreation, and better individual physical health. The challenge for Florida is that we, as the third largest state, rank among the lowest states in terms of civic health. And we want to change that. And the Florida Civic Advance this year in 2024 is going to conduct the first civic health index in over a dozen years. The last index was done in 2011. And as you can see from these rankings that are typically taken out of the census data, we are at the bottom of most of these rankings. And also you'll note that the data is dated. It is 2015, 2013. So we're really interested in creating a new benchmark for Florida going forward in 24. This is our strategic framework for the next couple of years. In particular, I would say the strategic priority we've focused on is supporting civic health and community measurement. and this is available on our website for further view. So the question here is, how does civic health and belonging relate to each other? And I'm going to, at this point, turn it over to Tim. I will just note that we ask every registrant to ask them what they wanted to learn from the webinar. And these are the kind of summary of the responses that we've received at this point. And so you can see the who, what, and how. And the how is related to strategies for how belonging can be implemented in a community. So, Tim, I will turn it over to you at this point, and you can go ahead and introduce the panelists.
Great. Thank you very much, Bob. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for choosing your next hour to look at this really timely issue of civic engagement. In a time when 4 out of 5 people globally live in countries that are becoming less democratic, the issue of civic health is a particularly potent and important topic. I want to underscore what Bob said about Florida and the necessity for us to move in the direction of creating a civic health index or a measurement tool for understanding how we're doing, because it's just not current in Florida, and we desperately need that in order to know how to make progress with regard to actions that will increase civic health. The traditional civic health index has predominantly used census data, as Bob mentioned. It's Florida Civic Advance's goal to expand that into so that it includes substantial local data, a broader definition of civic health that takes into account issues that relate to race equity and the inclusivity that is important for civic health. So that brings us to today's topic. FCA sees this concept of belonging as being an innovative addition to the Civic Health Index. In fact, belonging is probably the key or a key to improving inclusive civic health. Quixada Vissing will focus on the concept of belonging and its converse, othering. She will spotlight the city of belonging in Seattle, and her colleague, Frank Nam, will also be available to answer questions during that period. So who is Quixada? Quixada is a researcher about civic engagement, specializing at that. That's her area of specialty is civic health. Quixada wrote the New Hampshire 2012 and 2020 state civic health indexes, and is currently working and partnering in Maine and New Hampshire to write their 24 civic health indexes. FCA is Florida Civic Advance is in the process of raising the resources needed to engage Quixada to work on a similar civic health index in Florida. She's also the author of a toolkit called Local Civic Health, a guide to building community and bridging divides. Quixada, welcome to the Florida Civic Advance Third Thursday webinar. And before you begin your presentation, would you please spend a minute talking about providing a definition of the terms belonging and its antonym othering in the context of community and civic health. And thanks again, Quixada, for being here.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and looking forward to a good conversation. To give us some foundational belonging and othering definitions, I think really simplistically, I'd say belonging is where everyone feels welcome, regardless of their background and experiences, and feels like they have the supports needed to participate in their community. my colleague Frank has done a lot of thought around defining belonging, and as someone who can chime in if we want to have deeper discussions about the definition of belonging later on. And I think othering is sort of the inverse of belonging, where people end up feeling like they stick out in their community, and that they're not welcome, that they're, because of something about their identity, or their experiences, that they're either left out or pushed out of processes. And I'd say that can include decision-making processes and just general, cultures and connectivity in a community. So I hope that helps us to have some foundations to work off of today. And I did want to share some slides. And before I do that, I wanted to introduce my colleague, Frank. So for those of you who have gallery view, you might be able to see Frank. He's got a baseball cap on. He's waving now. Frank and I are colleagues who work together on this project. We weren't sure if Frank would be able to attend or not because of his travel schedule, but he was available, so we're all lucky. So I'm going to be giving the presentation today, but when we get to the Q&A, this is really both Frank and my work, so we can both answer questions about cities of belonging. And I'm going to pull up some slides for you. Give me just a second here. Right. So thank you for your interest in cities of belonging. Tim gave me an introduction, so I won't say much, but I did just want to clarify something related to a question that one of the participants had in the chat. So I run my own business called Public Engagement Partners. It's actually an international consulting firm that works on civic research and community engagement practices in communities. And one of my main clients is an organization called Civic Commons that is affiliated with the Seattle Foundation, but its own programmatic wing. And the program of Cities of Belonging is a project of Civic Commons. So that's a few layers, but just wanted to sort of explain all the points of connection. My colleague Frank also works for Civic Commons. I am physically located in Maine, but work all over the US and Canada and a little bit in Europe as well. And Civic Commons is located in Seattle and works throughout Washington State and sometimes does national work as well. So hope that helps to just orient people a bit. So I wanted to start off with this really striking statistic. So this is from a document called the Belonging Barometer. If you don't know this document, it's a really excellent report on belonging with some research, national research by the American Immigration Council. And they released a report. And what they saw is that feelings of belonging in the United States are really quite low. You can see that these are all below 50%. So really, small groups of people in the nation are feeling like they belong at work. Only 36% feel like they belong at work. 32% feel like they belong in their country, in the nation. And 26% feel they belong in their local community. So really only a quarter of people, 1 in 4, are feeling like they belong in their local community. So this is really, really upsetting data to see. And I think it speaks to the need to start thinking more deeply about how we cultivate belonging in communities. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why belonging matters, and I'm actually going to pull up audio clip from the U.S. Surgeon General, who's called Vivek Murthy. And it's just a minute-long clip, but he talks about belonging and the intersections with health and how it's affecting our country. And I just wanted to play this for you because I think his words are really powerful. So and let me just make sure. I think I forgot to share the audio, share sound. Okay, so we're good. And here we go.
Yes, out loud. But when we can't dialogue, we can't do that. But the fourth and final force I'll mention is the one that's at the heart of your question, which is around loneliness and isolation, which has been growing. If you had told me that loneliness and isolation was a challenge, a public health threat, if you will, on a scale as big as any other public health threat we face, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I would have been skeptical. I'm not really sure. But I actually was educated on this by people all across the
hasn't necessarily been me, but as far as like
Right.
facilitating, sorry,
I
my
think-
camera goes on and off. all the
I
time.
think we've got someone who needs to be muted. Could one of the hosts
Has to
take
do
care of that?
anything with the community corrections, and that's
Yes,
really kind of
everybody,
fair.
please,
Right now,
please
our current
mute,
chair
please
is
mute your,
Lieutenant Nick Troxel with the city police. So he has been more so, once he became chair, facilitating the meetings, agendas go out to him, things like that. So he's been more of the
If I
coordinating
can
piece
find
of
this
it.
person.
So
where is that?
All right, I think we've got, all right, so we're gonna try that again, folks. Sorry
Okay.
about that disturbance in the sound. Let me just get this back. So sorry about that. It just looks like one of our participants was multitasking, as we all do sometimes. So some sign of our times. And let me get this back. Okay, so we'll try it again.
But the fourth and final force I'll mention is the one that's at the heart of your question, which is around loneliness and isolation, which has been growing. If you had told me that loneliness and isolation was a challenge, a public health threat, if you will, on a scale as big as any other public health threat we face, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I would have been skeptical. I would have said, are you really sure? But I actually was educated on this by people all across America who, through their own stories, helped me realize that loneliness was more than something that I had experienced in my own life as a child and as an adult. It was more than something I had just seen in my patients, but it was something that people all across America were experiencing. There are many surveys now which are telling us that more than half of Americans feel lonely, and the numbers are greatest among young people, as it turns out. And when people struggle with loneliness, not only is it bad for their mental health, increasing their risk for depression and anxiety, but it also increases their risk for heart disease and premature death and so many other physical illnesses. So you put all of this together, and what you find is a recipe for despair. And if we want to break this cycle, if we want to actually reclaim lives that are full of joy, that are fulfilling, we have to rebuild fundamentally our connection to one another. And that is one of the great challenges that we've got to undertake in the years ahead.
So, when we hear the Surgeon General speak, he is speaking about loneliness, and later in the podcast, he does also talk about belonging. But to just connect the dots, when people don't feel that they belong, they feel lonely, they feel isolated from their communities. And there's a lot of research coming out that loneliness affects our physical health, that it's just as deadly as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, or heart disease or something like that. So I think that what we start to see as we explore belonging is that belonging has a lot of impacts around just how people are able to function in their communities. Let me go to the next slide here. All right. But what I wanted to do is just to kind of take a poll with you. So we're going to use a technology called Mentimeter. One of my colleagues is going to help chat the website for Mentimeter and the code so that people can access this. So it's a live poll, and I wanted to just get your opinions about belonging, because I have a feeling that many of you are actually having experiences with belonging in your local communities that you contribute. And let me just pull this up. I promise this is my only other sort of multimedia thing here. But I think it's helpful to hear from the crowd. All right. So the first question here is let's see. Is in a word or two, how does a lack of belonging affect your local community? Let us know if you're having any trouble getting into Mentimeter, but you just go to menti.com and enter that code. I like to do it on my cell phone, but you can do it on your computer too, if you prefer. Okay, we've got some words coming in. So someone wrote indifference, lack of diverse opinion. Give people a minute to respond here. All right, so I'll start reading of these. So in a word or two, how does the lack of belonging affect your local community? People said a lack of diverse opinion, disengagement, people being uninformed, indifference, don't know your neighbors, disengaged. So we've really seen that word twice. Polarization, reduced participation. So as we can see, you don't just have to take my word for it. I think you know from your own experiences that there are a lot of negative impacts around when you don't have belonging in a community, how it can affect your local community. And we'll go to the next question, which is exploring, and this was actually a question from one of the participants, but exploring what connections do you see between belonging and civic engagement? So how do you see these things as linked? I'm very curious to see what people come up with. And here you can type a phrase, you can type a sentence. You don't have to just do 1 or 2 words. I'll start reading some of the answers here and people can feel free to still keep responding. For those who just joined, we're doing a Menti poll about what connections you see between belonging and civic engagement. So some of the ideas here people shared is if it doesn't feel like you matter, then you wouldn't want to engage. Engagement then only comes for those that belong. So, basically this person here is saying, belonging is really like a precursor to engagement. Someone else wrote, the connection here is caring about your community and wanting to make a difference or help improve things. Personal ownership of the community's success comes from feeling like you belong. There's some comments around how there's a strong connection where civic engagement is muted by a lack of belonging. And then the potential for connection, right, with belonging and engagement, but resilience depends on how people become engaged. So really, I think that's about the experiences people have when they're asked to engage. Do they feel like they belong? Do they feel like they matter? Another comment around community ownership. So we've got 2 of those here. Some comments about the importance of feedback from engagement. And the last comment here that I see, you feel contentment, empowered, proud. What you want to see may not reflect who you are if you are not participating. Yeah, great. Well, I just wanted to thanks for participating in this poll. I just wanted to give the group a moment to respond because I find when I'm talking to groups like yours, a lot of you already know quite a bit about this topic and can really help enrich the conversation. And I encourage you to keep doing that during the Q&A as well. But to just sort of connect some dots with civic engagement and belonging, for those of you who've seen the now kind of old movie Field of Dreams, which is a nice classic movie, there's that phrase, if you build it, they will come. And what I want to say about civic engagement and belonging is if you build engagement processes, they still might not come. and the reasons for that are often that we haven't addressed belonging. So I can't tell you how many times I've worked with, local communities who put a lot of effort into creating a engagement process that they think a bunch of people are going to come out to, and then no one shows up and they scratch their heads and wonder, well, why didn't people come? Maybe no one cares. And the reality is that a lot of the time people don't show up to events because they don't actually feel like they belong at those events and that those events aren't for them. And so, when we build cultures of belonging, we're able to address systems and histories of discrimination that may help people feel like they historically haven't been welcome and have been either pushed out or left out for decision-making processes. And belonging, addressing belonging can also address barriers to feeling unwelcome And so some examples of these that I think we are starting to know as a civic engagement field is things like if you don't speak the language that the event is held in, you're probably going to feel like you don't belong. If you don't look like everyone else at the event, you're probably going to feel like you don't belong if you're not dressed, the same way as other people. And so I think that when we create opportunities for engagement, we really want to think about how we truly make all people feel welcome and like they're there, like the event is for everyone and it's there for people to participate. And this doesn't just go for events, but really for cultures and communities around belonging. So I hope that's a helpful connection of the dots. I also wanted to just connect one other concept before we jump into cities of belonging, which is the idea of civic health. And Bob mentioned that when we started today. So this idea of measuring civic health are that it's helpful, as Bob mentioned, to know where are we as a state or where are we as a city or a community around our civic health? Where are we strong and where are we deficient? So sometimes doing surveys can help shine lights on, wow, we had a really low voter turnout. What's going on here? What are the roots behind these questions? But then, from when we do these assessments, then the next step is action, right? So a lot of the time, I think the first step is better understanding a trend, right? So for instance, if people in your community aren't really helping each other out, aren't really connecting with others in the community, what's beneath that? Why aren't people doing that? And that may take some, more research, doing some interviewing, talking with community groups, really trying to understand what the dynamics are. But the other things that I think would need to happen over time to improve civic health would be to do things like addressing, policy changes that help more people to be able to engage and belong in their communities, to create community initiatives around belonging and engagement, and to do civic education so that people have the capacities and knowledge to be able to participate in their communities. So really, when we're talking about cities of belonging today, I see cities of belonging as a potential intervention around low levels of civic health. This is something that you could do essentially, and so I hope that framing helps people to understand how we're connecting belonging and civic health. So I just wanted to share a little bit of background around cities of belonging. So this is an idea that we came up with at Civic Commons. And the idea is that the word cities of belonging is misleading in a way because it's not just city government who's propelling this process, although city government would play a huge role, but it's really a cross-sector collaboration between city government, between community organizations, between local businesses and community members to try to really transform the culture in a community to being a place of belonging. So making Miami a city of belonging, or making Orlando a city of belonging, where everyone feels like they belong and have a voice in the community. And there's a few different steps that we see around becoming a city of belonging. So these are kind of like our ingredients of what we would say it takes to become a city of belonging. And so one is to address policy and practice. And this is really policy, both like legislative policy, like policy that local government sets, but also policy within organizations. So more internal culture and ways that organizations work, and practices of maybe it's not official policy, but it's just the way that we do things. So I think that what this takes is really, really looking hard at the policies and practices you have in place and asking questions about, does this help everyone to feel welcome? Does this really help everyone to participate and have a voice? Are there communities that are othered or excluded through our policies and practices? And how can we make some changes so that we really are a community that is in place to work for everyone? And then another step here is really thinking about opportunities for helping people connect and helping them connect across differences. I think there's both places and opportunities. And when we think about places, we might want to look in our community and say, like, do we actually have physical places where people can connect, where they can connect, among their similarities, right? So a place for youth to connect, for instance, but also a place for people to connect across differences, like a public park where lots of different people can come and enjoy a green space. And then there's also a question of opportunities for it to connect. So, are there actually networks and structures in place where people are able to connect, as well as events? So an event would be more like a community festival, but a network or structure would be something like a, parent teacher association, initiatives like a community dialogue. And these are opportunities that can be led by government, they can be led by schools or other public institutions like the library. They can be led by community organizations or local businesses, and can really occur both in person and online. But I think a place that really has a rich culture around a city of belonging has lots of opportunities, both physically to connect, and just like events and opportunities for people to connect. And then there's a question of advocacy. So I think, inevitably, the way that historical racism and discrimination has played out in our country and in our world, we end up having certain groups that have had less voice and power at decision-making tables. And that's part of the reason why they end up feeling othered, is because of these systems of discrimination. And so a city of belonging will need to do some advocacy for those groups to make sure that all groups are equally represented. So maybe that means that the disability group, or a group representing refugees and asylum seekers is coming forward to advocate for the populations they serve, to make sure that population is also welcomed and can belong in the community. With any project, I think, where you're trying to make systemic change, it's really important to do measurement. And with cities of belonging, we encourage measurement at 2 levels. And one is finding a baseline of, what are our better. And lastly, something that we talk a lot about at Civic Commons is this idea of civic muscle, which I love this phrase. And and really the idea is that we're helping people to build the muscles so that they can really build their capacity for this work long term. And so we're thinking about how we create skill opportunities for people to lead this work, to develop skill sets, to have mindset shifts, to create culture change. But that's all, starts with some, trainings, with some community dialogues, with some opportunities for professional development, with experiences, so that the community is able to expand their capacity to do this kind of work over time. And it'll just get stronger as you go. So just to talk a little bit about what Civic Commons does. So I wanted to clarify something. Even though Civic Commons is affiliated with the Seattle Foundation, to do a Cities of Belonging project, community would need to do some local fundraising. This isn't an initiative where we're able to give out grants, unfortunately. But Frank and I can certainly share how this work has been lifting off in local communities. I think a lot of it has been relying on local community foundations to help support the work. Sometimes local government may have some funds that they can put into this work themselves. But these are some of the services that Civic Commons is offering to help lift off a city of belonging. And the first is getting a baseline. So as I mentioned, it's important to just understand what's going on with belonging and engagement in our local community. So we do a lot of this work through surveying, and often draw on national indicators like the Belonging Barometer so that we can make comparisons between your local community and the nation. But what we know is in doing survey work is that numbers are helpful, but they're just signposts that help us to draw our attention to things, and they don't tell us the full story behind why those signposts are there. And so we also have a qualitative analysis tool called the Belonging and Engagement Landscape Analysis, the BELA, where what we do is once we see some trends, like, youth aren't participating as much in public meetings as other populations, then we can start to dig into, well, why not? Like, what's the history behind this? So we can kind of probe into different trends that we see in the baseline. But in the Bella, we also look for assets in the community around belonging and engagement that can be built upon. We try to explore what some of the historic challenges have been in this area. And that helps us to support a community in moving forward. And then in terms of other supports, so basically in every community that we would work with for a city of belonging, we would create some customized toolkits and trainings to help that particular community do work around belonging and engagement in the way that they want to do it. So for instance, in some communities, you may want to focus on belonging for, really building belonging for certain populations in the community. So maybe, you feel like the Black community has been particularly marginalized in your city, and you want to make that part of the focus of the belonging work is really, deep grassroots work with the Black community around belonging, and then expanding that out to the rest of the city. It might look different in another community. Maybe the focus is on youth. So there may be some focuses that where we can create some supports to help you lift off your belonging work. And then the sort of fourth piece is that so basically you would make a plan and every community would look a little bit different around what does a city of belonging look like for us. So, St. Petersburg might make a plan, Miami might make a plan, and within your plan, you would have different goals that you've set around how to build a city of belonging. Well, then there's the complexity of actually implementing those goals, and that can be difficult stuff to do when you're not supported. So part of what Frank and I do is work with communities to advise them with a local steering committee on exactly how to carry out this belonging work, so that you don't feel like you're alone in the process. So some of the impacts that we anticipate, and the belonging work is new. We actually are just launching this in Washington State in a couple communities. And so it is emergent work. So you're kind of like almost coming behind the scenes of some of the work that we're developing. And I'm really excited to share it with you. But what we anticipate are some impacts in three key areas, although there may be others as well. One would be around policy, that we really expect to see increased capacity of local staff working both in and outside of government to create policy and institutional practices that support belonging. We also anticipate more social connectivity. So, that there will be more organizational collaborations, hopefully also collaborations across sectors, formal and informal networks that emerge from belonging work in individual relationships. And the third piece is a narrative shift where people are really just thinking differently. Like there's a consciousness around how to cultivate belonging, how to really make people feel welcome, how to promote civic engagement in the community in a way that maybe there wasn't before. So in closing, I'll just say, I realize that in this moment in history, it can really feel like sometimes there are no paths forward, and there is hope. And this is something where we feel a lot of hope, is that fostering a culture of belonging is something very much in control of a community. And that we think that the more that this is built, it will start to strengthen civic engagement in a community, which will start to strengthen local democracy and really help our communities begin to heal at both the individual and collective level. So, I know Tim is going to start with some questions in just a second, but I'm Quixada. I put my email here. My colleague Frank is here. Frank may want to share his email as well in the chat. And our other colleague is Michael Brown, who works with us on this project. So we're really the team who's been working on Cities of Belonging, and really appreciate you learning a little bit about our work today.
Well, great. That's great, Quixada. Really appreciate you sort of taking us behind the curtain in terms of the effort that's going on in Washington State. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that you're really in that process now. This is not a fait accompli in a bunch of different communities. So you're not looking backwards at it. You're really looking forwards at it. So one of the questions I have is, where does, or to what degree does things like community organizing fit into this process in terms of relationship building inside a community that might be not very well networked.
Yeah, I wanna open this up to my colleague Frank, because he's actually been doing a lot of work around belonging in the region of Seattle.
Mhm.
And so I think, Frank, if you feel comfortable, I'd love for you to take the question first. And I can always respond afterwards.
Yeah, I'll be completely honest. I was multitasking and I did not hear the question fully. So Tim, can you repeat the question?
Well, I
Sorry about that,
deeply
Frank.
appreciate the honesty, Frank.
No, I'm going to be completely forthright.
So it seems to me that one of the tools or one of the techniques or approaches that might be helpful to build a sense of belonging is community organizing. I don't know whether or not that's part of the approach or philosophy or tools you've already used, and I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Seattle, we've created this called the Greater Compact for Belonging. And the Greater Compact for Belonging is basically a social contract. We developed it over 3-4 years time with lots of community conversations, lots of people from different lived experiences, different sectors. And we took that information and we made three values around belonging obviously being one of them, love and justice. And then we asked the community, like, what are the practices that help belonging, that create belonging? And one of them is actually advocacy. And advocacy meaning, like, if you really want to build belonging, you have to advocate for others, right? And it can be as simple as, like, recommending someone for a job at your company, to actually picking up a sign and marching on the street, or engaging with, like, a community, a bill that's trying to be passed, right? I know this is nonpartisan, so I'm just keeping that generic. So yeah, community organizing is at the heart of belonging, just because when communities care for each other, that's why they organize, right? And that care is such a huge concern. But my warning is, I see a lot of community organizers that have such passion to get things done and be action oriented, that they surpass and bypass the relationship building. And then it becomes a transactional, like, you all need to do this, and we need to get there and do that. And there's no, like, hey, what brought you here? Like, what drives you? Why do you care about this thing so much? Right? There isn't storytelling. Yeah.
I hear that. That's a good point. The advocacy sort of ends up superseding the relationship building. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Kathy, I saw that you had your hand up. You have a question?
I am so embarrassed. I meant to clap, but I realized I read that I did. I'm sorry. I meant to clap for Quixada. I thought it was terrific. And I love what you're doing. And of course, I love what Bob and Tim does. And it's all so important. But I do have a question also. That's why I asked about Seattle versus Maine. And, Quixada, the age-friendly movement. I mean, first of all, there's age-friendly Seattle, but also in Maine, there are over 80 age-friendly communities, and they have now surpassed the nation. Tim, I don't even know if you knew this, but they have the highest proportion of older adults now.
Yeah.
Florida is not the highest now. And so my question to Quixada is, have you aligned this work at all? Because there is a lot of intersection with the age-friendly work and certainly mobilizing older adults. And so, Quixada, do you know about the age-friendly work? Have you connected up there in Maine?
Kathy, I'm so glad you brought this up. I actually haven't done much with the age-friendly work, but I have done work quite similarly with, so UNICEF is also one of my clients, and they have a project called Child-Friendly Cities. And that's partly where we got the idea for Cities of Belonging, but I think it's similar to, my guess is it's similar to age-friendly cities where UNICEF lays out criteria of what it takes to become a child-friendly city, which I'm also certainly happy to talk with folks about if they ever have interest in that. But, what I see is the overlap in whether you're becoming a child-friendly city or an age-friendly city. Actually, the unifying factor behind with all of those is becoming a city of belonging, right? Actually, we want everyone to belong. We want youth to belong. We want older adults to belong. We want, new Americans to belong. And so I think in a way the cities of belonging framing, can be like a nice umbrella for that. And that I could see underneath that, there might be more specific initiatives to target certain populations to make sure that they feel supported in a community. But Kathy, I would love to, especially living in Maine, I would love to, know more about the age-friendly communities if you want to.
Well, what I'll do is I'll get your email and I'll connect you to my colleagues who are, very involved. I mean, they're real leaders. The state has the most in the whole nation, and about 10% of all the age-friendly communities in the United States. But, respect and social inclusion is a distinct domain, the built environment, literally everything you said. And the thing that struck me on civic health, the tie-in with health, one of the things we're doing here in Florida is trying to embed, all aspects of the age-friendly planning with our local health departments, because they have dedicated staff. They're doing community health improvement planning, and they're looking at measures of health. They're looking at, how you manage your housing, transportation, but also concepts of respect and inclusion as well. And I'm just wondering whether, again, the goal is to get better civic health and set better civic engagement among people, and knowing that there's some aligned efforts that could make your work stronger. We're stronger together. So I don't know, but that's something I will do. I will connect you.
So Kathy, thank you for raising that. And I know that that's a topic that's on our agenda to talk with you about in Sarasota. So we'll reach out and do that. Kevin, I saw your hand up.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you both, Frank and Quixada, for really interesting. Just by way of connection really quick, I'm the Senior Facilitator for Health Policy for the William D. Ruckelshaus Center out of UW and WSU, and Michael Brown is actually co-vice chair of my advisory board. So high respect for all of you guys and the work that you do. And I think there's a fair amount of connectivity in terms of what we're all trying to strive for in our missions. My question is, I have two questions. One is a quick one, if you can. Which cities in Washington are you working with on this project, if that's publicly available? And the second is really more a directed question. I live in the city of Edmonds. For those of you not in Washington, that's about 15 miles north of Seattle. It's sort of like a little enclave on the Puget Sound. It's a relatively wealthy suburb. 42,000 people. We do have a grossly underserved area on Highway 99, which is sort of a lot of car lots and industrial and high crime area that we've been focusing on. I'm vice chair of a commission in that city on economic development. And so I'm wondering what opportunities are, because we have a new mayor. We have a fair amount of new council members. I'm close to all of them. And am starting to work in this area with our new mayor, who's very, very interested in this. And so when it comes to engagement, I found that it's not the underserved community. We have enough representation on our commissions from our underserved community to engage them. They're highly engaged. It's not our seniors, retired seniors in town, because they have lots of time and like a lot of voice to engage. It is the young couples and young families who I found are the hardest. I can even get high schoolers to engage, but we have an awfully tough time with people who are just, they're building their families and they're building their careers. They don't have a lot of time for civic engagement. And yet this is probably one of the most important groups to engage. So, we go to our, activities and workshops and things like that, and a lot of gray and white hair, or a few younger people, very much younger people. How do you, what's the reality of how, it's easy to say, well, we'll just try and use technology, we'll meet them where they're at and that kind of stuff. But I haven't found the magic fairy dust that works. What's your experience?
So Frank and Quixada, any words of wisdom here?
Yeah, Frank, maybe you can take the more locally based questions. Kevin, I can respond to the question you just asked, and I'll actually start with just a little bit broader framing. So in terms of the question of, could your community work as a city of belonging? For Washington State, absolutely. I will also say for communities who are outside of Washington State, we had originally intended to sort of pilot this work in Washington State and then expand out. That being said, the beautiful thing about doing experimental work is sometimes it doesn't like you find interest in other communities. So if there was a community nationally that was interested in this work outside of Washington State, I think we'd be open to exploring that and lifting off a City of Belonging project in a different community, even though that wasn't our original plan, just because, sometimes if the momentum is right and you've got the sort of people lined up to make this happen, it's the time to go with it. So we're open to that. I think we would just have more conversations and try to figure out together what that could look like and how it would move forward if folks wanted to do that.
And which cities in Washington, if you're able to share that, are you working with?
Yeah, Frank, I'll defer to you on that. Can we share that yet, or what do you think? We've got two
Yeah.
communities.
But both of them are not off the ground yet. One's closer to getting to in fact, I'm this Friday, tomorrow, I'm flying to Spokane. So we're meeting with a Spokane council member and some just local leaders for cross sectors. And then I've been trying to work with folks in Tacoma. I've met with the mayor, I've met with, the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation and a couple others. And I'm actually be there Monday. I'm meeting with a Pierce County legislator and my friend who's the VP of Goodwill Tacoma. And so we're just trying to get some more, because the thing is, this is a movement and it doesn't work unless there is a group of folks in the community willing to put in the work, put in the time, put in the effort to move this along. Because we can't come in as an outsider from that community and say hey, we're going to turn the city into a city belonging for you. People have to kind of want it, right, and push for it.
Yeah, I'm kind of reading between the lines and hearing, and this I may be off, and you can tell me so, that there's sort of an analog to the challenges and potential opportunities around collective impact models.
Yeah,
so,
Sure.
Absolutely.
So we need to move to Jim. Jim, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you to Quixada and Frank. And I want to thank again as one of the board members of FCA, but in my real job out this window, I'm the resilience officer for Miami-Dade County, where we have an Office of Engagement and Equity that I work with all the time under the direction of our mayor, who philosophically agrees with everything I heard this hour. But I was processing the words, as a quite frankly, as an Anglo. I'm a minority in a majority county, right? And so everything we do, we have to translate words into Spanish and in Haitian Creole. And sometimes those translations lose the meaning that we as Anglos have with these. I don't know how, what was the last, we had othering, was the word?
Yep.
And I got it, but I was trying to figure out a translation. And I just wondered, have you had that kind of experience working in communities? Because we have a lot of belonging in this large county, but they are actually communities that have moved here from other places, and they brought that connection with them, and they created neighborhoods. Or I mean, we even have cities that have majority Haitian elected officials now. So I just see that transitions. Age, Kathy was really right. We used to be age of retirement, but now it's just the complexity of demographics.
Thoughts, Frank or Quixada?
Yeah, I know Frank's been doing belonging work on the ground in Seattle, so he may have more thoughts to add. But one thing I would say, Jim, is I think it helps when you are including people from the communities that you want to represent in the process of designing and framing an initiative. And so the way that we've designed the Cities of Belonging work is that we would work with a cross-sector and cross-demographic group that's representative of the community, who'd be our advisory council. And so that'd be a working group that we'd be collaborating with. And so I would hope, just like with your example of Miami, that someone from the, who speaks Haitian Creole from those communities would be on the advisory council, who would be helping us to think through, actually, if you translate this way, this is really not going to work for our community. We need to do it differently. And so we're sort of guided through that process. The challenge always, I think, with advisory councils is that there's a lot of asks for free labor out there. And so I think to Kevin's question earlier about how we engage people who are busy and don't have a lot of bandwidth to engage. I think if you can stipend that advisory council and make it a paid position, that can open up participation from people who may not be able to participate otherwise. I know that's something that this idea of stipends is very much out in the world right now, and I think we're familiar with it. But at the end of the day, when people are very busy and have to pick priorities, sometimes paid work wins, and so that may be a way to address it as well. Frank, I don't know if you have any follow-up thoughts on this.
Yeah, when I was at the Department of Neighborhoods in the city of Seattle, we had the same issue, not just with Spanish, but with Amharic, Vietnamese, Tagalog, Korean, Chinese, like all these languages. So we actually created something called the community engagement liaisons. And these liaisons were paid $50 an hour so that it kind of matches. It's not just a stipend, they're paid at a high wage. And what they do is not just translate and interpret, but when, say, like the transportation department has a new policy around like parking in neighborhoods, our liaisons would go and actually sit on the policy meetings, learn about the policy, be really educated in it. And then they would go out into their communities and spread that word, like let them know with like, translated materials, but not just like, hey, here's a flyer, read it. Like actually like sit down and have like community engagement conversations. These are people that are, leaders, members of their community that are well respected or, well known. And then when they did interpretation, or when they did translation, they actually had a 2-pass model, right? One person would translate it and then give it to another liaison, and then the person would read it again just to catch any errors. Because like, othering, how do you say othering? Like we were trying to do like a free ice cream social, and it said like, get a scoop, give a scoop, right? And people are like, in English, we're like, oh, get a scoop and give us a scoop. Makes sense. In other languages, like, what the heck does that mean? Like, we give you ice cream, you tell us stuff. Maybe it's better, but yeah.
So unfortunately, like any rich topic, there's not enough time in any given hour to really get as deep as we'd want to. I would say that the summary of many of the questions that were asked in advance of participants, they are looking for the pragmatic, the practical. How do we do things like increase community networks, and how do we do those kinds of things that relate to engagement itself? So I would say that we could keep going on those level of details for quite a while. And I'd remind everybody that this is a sort of you're exploring how to grow belonging. And so there's going to be a lot of learning that comes out of this that we'll all be able to benefit from. Last thing I would say is that I'm a big fan of asset-based community development. And I think that there's something to pay attention to with regard to the realities that residents can do an awful lot on their own without any institutions. And often that gets neither counted nor taken seriously. And that is a form of belonging that I think we need to be paying close attention to as well. So thank you so much for everybody spending 58 minutes on this so far. And Bob is going to conclude with some, I forgot one more thing. Quixada, I wanted to give you sort of the last word from the standpoint of just closing things out from your standpoint. And then we'll go to Bob.
Well, I think you've mostly covered it. I would just say, we're definitely, in an experimental phase. And if we can experiment with your community, we're happy to do that. And if you're doing work around belonging that you want to share with us, we'd love to know about it. So thanks everybody for attending today.
Thank you. Bob, back to you. Okay. Bob, are you there?
He's there virtually, but not.
You're muted, Bob.
And his camera, oh, there he goes.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Next February 15th, Thursday, we have a third program that we ran 2 in 23 on civic health and youth, and it's a Stetson University Law Youth Civic Engagement Program that we're going to focus on as an example. And just FYI, we post our videos of past webinars, so you can see them there. We encourage everyone to consider possible membership in Florida Civic Advance, and this is our website. And thanks for the entire board and Tim for your work on this, Quixada and Frank. And I think we are ready to adjourn.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.
All right.
Stayed on for a second to make sure
Yeah.
all good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
Really nice job. And I'm glad Frank was able to join us too.
Absolutely.
Tim, I thought Frank would be prepared to answer your question, so then I wish I'd answered it. But anyway, we just wanted to include him, so
It was good.
sorry about that.
Okay.
You know, I'd like for the three of us to